A PTA Karen said, "You're not even listening." But what Judy did next didn't just shock the room. It left a wealthy, entitled parent completely speechless and became the stuff of legend across 3 school districts. This is the story of how one elementary school principal, armed with nothing but her mind and years of quiet preparation, dismantled a bully in under 2 minutes without raising her voice once. And trust me, what she pulled off is something you won't believe until you hear it. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Judy Martinez had been the principal of Maplewood Elementary for nearly 20 years. She wasn't flashy. She didn't make headlines or post motivational quotes on social media. She was the kind of leader who remembered the name of every single student who walked through her doors. The kind who knew which kids had peanut allergies, whose parents were going through divorces, and who needed an extra lunch packed quietly into their backpack. Her superpower wasn't charisma or political connections. It was something far more rare. She actually listened. Really listened. The kind of listening that made people feel seen, heard, and valued even when she was about to tell them no. But on this particular Tuesday evening in October, Judy's listening skills were about to be put to the ultimate test. The monthly PTA meeting was being held in the school cafeteria, a cramped space that smelled faintly of disinfectant and yesterday's chicken nuggets. Folding chairs were arranged in uneven rows, and about 30 parents had shown up, most of them clutching coffee cups and wearing the exhausted expressions of people who'd rather be anywhere else. Judy sat at a table up front, flanked by the PTA president, a tired woman named Susan, and the school secretary, Mrs. Chen, who was taking notes on a laptop that had seen better days. Then Karen Whitmore walked in. 10 minutes late, naturally. Karen was the kind of woman who turned heads, not because of her beauty, but because of the sheer force of her presence. She wore a designer blazer that probably cost more than most of the teachers' monthly paychecks. Her blonde hair was blown out to perfection, and her heels clicked sharply against the linoleum floor like a countdown to chaos. Karen had moved to the district 2 years ago when her husband, a corporate lawyer, took a position at a major firm downtown. She had money, connections, and the unshakable belief that rules were for other people. Karen didn't apologize for being late. She simply walked to the front row, dropped her Louis Vuitton bag onto an empty chair with a thud, and crossed her arms. Susan, the PTA president, was in the middle of discussing the upcoming fall festival when Karen interrupted. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "I hate to interrupt, but I have something urgent to address." Susan blinked, thrown off. "We're actually in the middle of—" "This can't wait," Karen said, standing up. The room went silent. Parents exchanged glances. Judy, sitting at the front table, folded her hands and waited, and then Karen started talking. She launched into a monologue that would last nearly 5 full minutes, pacing slightly as she spoke, her voice rising and falling with indignation. She complained about her son's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, claiming the woman's teaching methods were outdated and ineffective. She cited an article she'd read in some parenting magazine about progressive education models and insisted that Maplewood was falling behind. She name-dropped the private school her son had attended in their previous city, comparing it favorably at every turn. She mentioned, casually but pointedly, the sizable donation her family had made to the school's new playground fund just last spring. She demanded, not requested, that her son Brendan be moved to a different 4th-grade classroom immediately, mid-semester, because she didn't feel he was being challenged enough. Other parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few looked down at their phones. One dad in the back row whispered something to his wife, who elbowed him to be quiet. Susan tried to interject twice, but Karen steamrolled right over her. "I'm not finished," she said sharply, holding up one manicured hand. Through it all, Judy didn't move. She didn't take notes. She didn't pull out her phone or flip through a policy manual. She just sat there, hands folded on the table in front of her, eyes locked on Karen with an expression of calm, almost serene attention. To anyone watching, it looked like she wasn't doing anything at all. And that's exactly what set Karen off. Karen stopped pacing, turned to face Judy directly, and planted her hands on her hips. Her voice dripped with frustration and contempt. "Are you even writing this down?" she demanded. "You haven't moved. You're not taking notes. You're just sitting there." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "You're not even listening to me, are you?" The room held its breath. Someone in the 3rd row actually gasped. Susan looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Mrs. Chen's fingers froze over her keyboard. Every eye in that cafeteria turned to Judy Martinez, waiting to see what she would do. Judy took a slow, deliberate breath. A small smile, barely perceptible, tugged at the corner of her mouth. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm and steady, and said 5 words that would change everything. Actually, Mrs. Whitmore, I heard every word. Karen scoffed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. Oh, really? She said, her tone mocking. Then prove it. And that's when Judy did something that no one in that room, least of all Karen Whitmore, saw coming. Something so precise, so devastatingly thorough that parents would still be talking about it months later. But before we get to that, let me tell you why this moment mattered so much. If you're loving this story of someone standing up to entitlement with pure skill and preparation, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We bring you real stories of everyday heroes who refuse to back down, people who lead with intelligence instead of volume. Your support helps us share more powerful moments like this one. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's see how Judy handled this showdown. Because what she's about to do is nothing short of legendary. To understand why what happened next was so devastating, you need to know who Judy Martinez really was. She didn't come from money or privilege. She grew up in a cramped apartment in South Chicago, the daughter of Mexican immigrants who worked double shifts to keep food on the table. Her father cleaned office buildings at night. Her mother worked in a hospital laundry room, coming home every evening smelling of bleach and exhaustion. Judy learned early that nobody was going to hand her anything. If she wanted something, she had to work for it. And she had to be twice as good as everyone else to get half the credit. She put herself through college working as a waitress, sometimes pulling 20-hour days between classes and shifts. She'd study in the restaurant's back office during slow hours, textbooks propped against industrial-sized cans of tomato sauce. Her professors noticed something unusual about her. She never took notes during lectures, but she could recite back entire discussions word for word during exams. One professor asked her about it once. I can't afford to miss anything, Judy had said simply. So I remember everything. It wasn't photographic memory exactly. It was something she'd trained herself to do out of necessity. When you grow up poor, you learn that missing details can cost you opportunities, scholarships, jobs. So Judy taught herself to listen with every fiber of her being, to catch not just words but tone, emphasis, the spaces between sentences where the real meaning lived. She became a teacher first, working in underfunded schools where textbooks were outdated and class sizes were unmanageable. She remembered every student's name by the second day of school. She remembered their birthdays, their siblings' names, which ones came to school hungry, which ones showed up with bruises they tried to hide. Other teachers burned out and left. Judy stayed. She became assistant principal, then principal, and for 20 years she ran Maplewood Elementary with quiet competence. She wasn't the type to brag or seek recognition. She just did the work. But Karen Whitmore was a different breed entirely. Karen had never worked a day in her life, not really. She'd married well, married up, and she wore her husband's success like armor. She'd been a problem since the day she enrolled Brendan at Maplewood. First, it was the lunch menu. Too much processed food, she claimed, ignoring the fact that the school was working with a shoestring budget. Then it was the recess schedule. Too much unstructured play, not enough enrichment. She'd cycled through 3 different classroom volunteers because none of them met her standards. She'd gotten a teacher reprimanded for giving Brendan a B on a science project, insisting there must have been some mistake. Other parents were terrified of her. She had money, connections, and a lawyer husband who wasn't afraid to throw his weight around. She'd threatened to pull funding from the school at least twice before. Most people just gave her what she wanted because it was easier than fighting. But Judy had never been the type to choose easy over right. She knew Karen's type, had seen 100 versions of her over the years. People who mistook volume for authority, who thought their bank account gave them the right to rewrite the rules. And tonight, Karen had finally pushed too far. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. You're not even listening to me. 30 pairs of eyes watched Judy Martinez, waiting to see if she'd fold like everyone else always did. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, chin raised, absolutely certain she'd already won this fight. She had no idea what was about to hit her. Judy Martinez didn't rush. She didn't scramble to defend herself or snap back with anger. She simply smiled, that same small knowing smile, and straightened in her chair. Actually, Mrs. Whitmore, she said again, her voice carrying clearly through the silent cafeteria. I heard every single word, and if you'd like I can repeat them back to you, verbatim. Karen's eyes narrowed. I seriously doubt that. Judy nodded slowly. You arrived 10 minutes late and your first words were, excuse me. I hate to interrupt, but I have something urgent to address. You didn't actually apologize for being late. You simply stated that you hated to interrupt. There's a difference. Karen's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Judy continued, her tone calm and almost conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. You began by criticizing Mrs. Patterson's teaching methods, specifically calling them outdated and ineffective. You referenced an article you read in Education Weekly magazine, the September issue, about progressive education models. You said, and I quote, Schools like Maplewood are falling behind while other districts are innovating. You then compared our school to Brendan's previous institution, Riverside Academy, which you mentioned 3 separate times. The room was frozen. Mrs. Chen's hands hovered over her keyboard, motionless. Susan's coffee cup was halfway to her lips, forgotten. Parents in the back row were leaning forward, mouths open, watching this unfold like it was a championship boxing match. Karen's face had gone from confident to pale in a matter of seconds. Judy wasn't done. You brought up the donation your family made to the playground fund last spring. You specified it was sizable, though you didn't mention the exact amount, which was $15,000. You said it 3 minutes and 20 seconds into your speech, right after comparing our music program unfavorably to Riverside's. Judy's eyes never left Karen's face. You stated that Brendan wasn't being challenged enough. Your exact words were, "My son is bored in that classroom and I refuse to let his potential be wasted." You demanded that he be moved to Mrs. Chen's 4th grade class instead, because you'd heard from another parent that she assigns more advanced reading. Karen tried to interrupt. I didn't mean, but Judy held up one finger, polite but firm. The universal gesture for I'm not finished. You also mentioned that you'd spoken to 3 other parents who shared your concerns, though you didn't name them. You said Mrs. Patterson had been teaching for 22 years and that sometimes experience becomes complacency. You suggested that perhaps she'd lost her passion for teaching, and you ended by saying, and again I quote, "I've been patient, but my patience has limits and I expect this situation to be resolved immediately." The silence in that room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the scuffed cafeteria floor. Karen's arms slowly uncrossed. Her confident posture crumbled. She looked around at the other parents, many of whom were staring at her now with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed satisfaction. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Another parent actually started clapping before catching themselves. Judy leaned back in her chair, hands still folded calmly on the table. "So yes, Mrs. Whitmore, I was listening. I always listen. Now, would you like to hear my response to each of your concerns?" Karen Whitmore stood there, her designer blazer suddenly looking less like armor and more like a costume. Her mouth opened and closed twice before any words came out. I didn't mean," she trailed off, completely derailed. Judy's expression remained neutral, professional, even kind. "Let me address your concerns, Mrs. Whitmore. First, regarding Mrs. Patterson's teaching methods. She holds a master's degree in elementary education and has received district recognition for innovative curriculum development 3 times in the past 5 years. The article you referenced from Education Weekly actually supports the teaching model she uses, not contradicts it. I've read that issue." Parents were nodding now, some taking notes themselves. Karen's face flushed red. "As for moving Brendan mid-semester," Judy continued, "our policy requires educational justification, not parental preference. Brendan currently has an A- average in Mrs. Patterson's class. His reading assessments show he's performing above grade level. There's no academic reason for a move." Karen tried one more time, "But he says he's bored." "Children often confuse boredom with being appropriately challenged," Judy said gently. "What you're describing sounds more like adjustment anxiety. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you, Brendan, and Mrs. Patterson to discuss strategies for engagement. Would Thursday at 3:30 work for you?" Karen left that meeting without another word. She grabbed her Louis Vuitton bag, mumbled something about checking her calendar, and walked out of the cafeteria with her heels clicking half as confidently as when she'd arrived. The moment the door closed behind her, the room erupted. Parents who'd been silent for months suddenly found their voices. "That was incredible," someone said. "I can't believe she remembered all of that," another parent whispered. Susan, the PTA president, just shook her head in amazement. "Judy, how on earth did you do that?" Judy simply smiled. "I told you. I listen." But something bigger than one embarrassed parent had just happened in that cafeteria. For 2 years, Karen Whitmore had dominated every PTA meeting, every school event, every conversation. Parents had learned to stay quiet because speaking up meant becoming her next target. Teachers walked on eggshells around her because she had money and connections and wasn't afraid to use them. The school had been held hostage by one woman's inability to hear the word no. And in less than 5 minutes, Judy had changed all of that. The next day, Judy's phone started ringing. First, it was Mrs. Patterson, the teacher Karen had attacked. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Principal Martinez, I don't know what to say. I've been losing sleep over this situation. I thought maybe I was the problem." Judy cut her off gently. "You're an excellent teacher, Maria. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Your students love you and the data proves you're effective. That's what matters." Mrs. Patterson started crying. "You defended me without me even being in the room." "Thank you." Other teachers started stopping by Judy's office throughout the week, not just to thank her, but to tell her their own stories about difficult parents they'd been afraid to stand up to. Could you teach us how to do what you did? One young teacher asked. Judy thought about it. The following month, she organized a professional development workshop titled Active Listening as Leadership. 23 teachers attended. She explained her technique, the one she'd developed out of necessity growing up poor in Chicago. Listen with your full attention, not just to respond but to understand. Watch body language. Notice tone. Remember details because details matter. When someone feels truly heard, even if you tell them no, they respect the answer. But the bigger shift happened with the parents. At the next PTA meeting, attendance nearly doubled. People weren't afraid to come anymore. A mother who'd never spoken up before raised her hand and shared a concern about playground safety. Another parent asked about tutoring resources for struggling students. Conversation flowed naturally, productively, and Karen Whitmore, sitting in the third row this time instead of the front, stayed quiet. She listened for once instead of demanding to be heard. Susan pulled Judy aside after the meeting. You changed something here. People feel safe to speak now. Judy glanced around the emptying cafeteria. That's how it should be. School isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about what's best for the kids. But she knew the real work was just beginning. 3 weeks after the infamous PTA meeting, something unexpected happened. Judy was in her office grading incident reports when her secretary buzzed in. Principal Martinez, Karen Whitmore is here to see you. No appointment. Judy looked up from her desk, genuinely surprised. Send her in. Karen walked through the door looking different. She wasn't wearing her usual designer armor, just jeans, a simple sweater, and noticeably less makeup. She sat down across from Judy without being invited, but this time there was no arrogance in the gesture. Just exhaustion. I owe you an apology, Karen said quietly. Judy set down her pen and waited. I've been impossible. I know that. The other parents probably celebrate when I'm not at meetings. She laughed, but it was hollow. My husband pointed out that I've been asked to leave 3 different volunteer positions in 2 years. 3. She looked down at her hands. I don't know how to not be in control. It terrifies me. Judy leaned forward slightly. Can I ask you something, Karen? What are you really afraid of? The question seemed to crack something open. Karen's eyes welled up. That I'm failing him. Brendan. That if I don't push, if I don't demand the best, he'll fall behind and it'll be my fault. Judy nodded slowly. I see that in a lot of parents. The fear underneath the pushing. But here's what I've learned in 20 years of doing this job. Kids don't need perfect schools or perfect teachers. They need consistency, safety, and adults who believe in them. Brendan has all of that. Mrs. Patterson adores him. His reading scores are excellent. He has friends. He's thriving, Karen. You just can't see it because you're too busy looking for problems. Karen wiped her eyes. I took your advice. I sat in on Mrs. Patterson's class last Thursday. Judy raised an eyebrow. And she's wonderful. Brendan was engaged the whole time. He raised his hand 6 times. He was laughing with the other kids during group work. I realize the problem isn't the teacher. She paused. It's me. I'm the one who's bored, who feels useless now that Brendan's in school all day. So I invented problems to solve. It was the most honest thing Karen had ever said in Judy's office. That's incredibly self-aware, Judy said carefully. What are you going to do about it? Karen straightened her shoulders, some of that old determination returning but channeled differently now. I want to volunteer. Really volunteer, not take over. The art teacher mentioned she needs help organizing the supply closet. It's not glamorous, but I can do it. And I'd like to apologize to Mrs. Patterson in person. Judy smiled, a real smile this time. I think that would mean a lot to her. As Karen stood to leave, she paused at the door. That thing you did at the meeting, repeating everything I said, that wasn't just about putting me in my place, was it? Judy shook her head. It was about showing you that you matter enough to be heard, even when you're wrong. Karen's voice cracked slightly. Thank you for not giving up on me. And then she left. 6 months later, Maplewood Elementary looked different. Not physically. The paint was still chipped and the cafeteria still smelled like disinfectant and chicken nuggets. But the atmosphere had shifted. PTA meetings were collaborative instead of combative. Teachers felt supported instead of attacked. And Karen Whitmore had become, improbably, one of the school's most reliable volunteers. She organized the art supply closet, helped coordinate the spring book fair, and even apologized publicly to Mrs. Patterson during a staff appreciation event. She wasn't perfect. She still had opinions, still spoke her mind. But she'd learned to listen, too. The story of that October PTA meeting spread far beyond Maplewood. Other principals in the district called Judy, asking her to present at leadership conferences. How did you stay so calm? They'd ask. How did you remember everything she said? Judy's answer was always the same. It's not a trick or a talent. It's a choice. You choose to see people, really see them even when they're at their worst, especially when they're at their worst. because that's when they need it most. One afternoon, Judy was walking through the hallway when she saw Brendan Whitmore hanging up artwork outside Mrs. Patterson's classroom. He was laughing with two other kids, completely absorbed in their conversation about a book they were reading. Karen stood nearby, not hovering, just watching her son be happy. She caught Judy's eye and smiled, a genuine smile with no agenda behind it. In that moment, Judy understood that this was what success looked like. Not perfect test scores or flawless behavior, just kids thriving and parents learning to trust the process. Years later, when Judy finally retired from Maplewood Elementary, the school threw her a celebration. Hundreds of former students came back, now teenagers and young adults, to thank the principal who'd remembered their names and their stories. Teachers shared how she'd taught them to lead with patience instead of power. And Karen Whitmore, who'd once been the school's biggest problem, stood up and gave a speech. "Principal Martinez taught me that being heard doesn't mean being the loudest voice in the room," she said. "It means being brave enough to listen even when the truth is uncomfortable. She changed my life. She probably saved my relationship with my son. And she did it all by simply paying attention." Stories like Judy's remind us that real power comes from preparation, patience, and respect, even when it's hard to give. If this story moved you, we'd be grateful for your support. Consider donating to our channel so we can continue bringing you stories of everyday leaders who make a difference in their communities. Your contribution helps us produce more content celebrating unsung heroes who lead with integrity rather than volume. Every dollar helps us shine a light on the people who change lives quietly, without fanfare or recognition. Visit our website to donate today, and thank you for being part of this community that values character over ego. Together, we're proving that the loudest voice doesn't have to win. The most thoughtful one does. Judy Martinez is still remembered at Maplewood Elementary. Her photo hangs in the main office, and on her desk they've placed a small plaque that reads simply, "She listened." Because in the end, that was her superpower. Not memory, not wit, not authority. Just the radical act of truly hearing people, seeing their humanity even in conflict, and responding with both strength and grace. And in a world that rewards volume over substance, that might be the most powerful skill of all.